Welcome back to Author Journey. My name is CJ Anaya, and today I have a real treat for you because one of my most favorite authors ever is here with us today, Jennifer Griffith. Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
Hello. It's good to see you, Cindy.
It's great to see you too. We are going to introduce you and talk about an important subject that I love dearly. But first off, Jennifer Griffith writes light, sweet romances she calls cotton candy for the soul. Her Legally in Love collection stems from the fact she fell in love with a handsome law school student who now serves as a judge as well as her muse. Love that. She also writes billionaire makeover romances, billionaires and makeovers being some things with which she has less experience. Jennifer loves old cars, landscape paintings, fresh bread with raspberry jam, and reading. She lived in Japan during college, where she once ate a cricket on a dare. Awesome. She also traveled through Europe, where she slept a night in a castle on the Rhine. Did I say that right? Is it Rhine?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, because I never say things right. Okay, Jennifer worked summers in a cookie factory, and she spent a few years working for U.S. Congress before becoming a wife, a mom, and an author. So, Jennifer is awesome, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And because Jennifer and I are able to share in so many things that most authors deal with, I wanted to bring her on here so we could talk a little bit about constructive criticism, about negative reviews, and kind of how we can work through possible fears that we have of putting our work out there, how we handle negative reviews, that type of thing. So, Jen, I kind of wanted to turn the time over to you so that you can talk about this subject with us a little bit.
Well, okay, I have to start out, my preface is that everything I know about publishing, I know because I did it wrong the first time. I have done everything wrong so far. And the only reason that I have any measure of success whatsoever is that I didn't let doing something wrong make me quit. And so I just kept going and pushed through, even though everything I have done has been wrong the first time. But and that has included writing some things that have received negative reviews. And I mean, I'll just tell you my worst moment. It had more to do with timing, although the content of the moment was pretty bad too. But it was Christmas Eve, and it was about 15 minutes before our company was coming to eat Christmas Eve dinner with us, and I had been waiting to find out whether this book of mine had been reviewed in this magazine. It was a romance readers magazine and had 20,000 readers. And I kept looking and looking to find out if my review was there because I had submitted this book and I knew it was so good. And it ended up, I opened the email and there it was, the review. And it got 1 star out of 5.
No.
And the reviewer absolutely reamed it. She hated it. And I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I went out and kind of hobbled out and met our guests because, of course, the doorbell rang right then.
Right.
And I was just, I'm ashamed to say that I kind of let it ruined my attitude for the evening, and maybe it might have even spilled a little bit into the next day. So, you know, we've all been there. Everybody who's brave enough to put anything out there has had somebody say something rude about it. And that is just, sometimes it's really hard to take. But I think that after, my bad moment was more than a couple of years ago. And so since then, I've thought a lot about how should I have handled that? What should I do differently in order to be able to keep going rather than letting it stop me?
Awesome. Okay, so what did you do? What have you done?
Well, for one, I decided that what I was going to do was try to write better. So, step 1, improve my craft. But step 2 was make sure that, so I think part of the reason it got a bad review was that I had classified the book in one genre when really it belonged in another. And so it ended up being a bait and switch for the reader, when I think on that book, I realized that book was more of an adventure with a romance subplot rather than a romance. And so the person read it expecting a romance was let down. And so it's kind of like if you go to the movie and it was advertised as a comedy and you show up and it's just like a drama with some dark comic moments and you're like, hey, that's a ripoff, and so you're mad. Not because the content of it was poor, but so much as that it isn't what you were expecting or what you were wanting as a consumer of entertainment. So that's the other thing I realized. I needed to go back and reclassify it and like re-examine what that book was and make sure that I classify it correctly so that the readers don't feel like there was a bait and switch.
Okay.
So, and then the third thing I think, and this actually, those two things, are kind of more specific to that book, but the third thing I would say is that not every book I read is going to resonate with me. I am not always going to enjoy every book. In fact, there are a lot of books that everybody liked that I just kind of found to be a little meh. Books that people were just like, millions of people love certain books, and I'm just like, well, And I finally, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, hit on a phrase that released me from feeling A, guilty about not liking what everybody liked, and B, feeling hurt when somebody didn't like my stuff. And I think that phrase is, I'm not the audience for that. And if I tell myself, well, I wasn't really the audience for, let's say it was vampires. I don't really like the idea of blood sucking. It doesn't really float my boat.
Right.
It floats a lot of people's boats, and that's absolutely great. Everybody else in the world can love a blood-sucking vampire. Go for it. But me, I'm a lot more content reading some other stuff that maybe those fans wouldn't like. There may be some crossover, but maybe not. And it doesn't matter because I'm the audience for other things. And so it takes away the emotional component from it. I think for me as a writer, I can say, well, this dude gave me a bad review, but he really likes to read about, robots. And I'm not going to write about robots in this book. Maybe I'm never going to say never. I might write about a robot. I did write about a sumo wrestler, so there is no...
And that was a fabulous book, by the way. Such a good book.
But, okay, so I'm just rambling now, but I think that when we can tell ourselves, okay, well, that guy or that woman was not the audience for this book, and maybe they're not the audience for my brand of writing. That's okay. That doesn't mean my brand of writing has no value.
Right.
Just because one person, we can't please everyone. Maybe...
Right.
President Trump isn't going to like my romantic comedy, but I probably wouldn't like what he wrote or read. So, it's just sort of like, you're not going to have crossover with every reader, and you can just let that stop bothering you when you use that phrase, I'm not the audience for this, or that person wasn't the audience for my fill in the blank.
Right. Okay, so how do you feel like you should respond to people when they leave bad reviews? Because some of these bad reviews are, they can really eviscerate you. Like these mean, do you engage at all? Like what would you do?
My advice would be to never engage. Never, ever, 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 ever. Like infinity. Ever, infinity. Never, ever. So, because it brings down your level of professionalism too much. And then, part of it is that's someone's opinion. And usually in a review like that, there is a clue that readers who like your stuff will see and say, well, I actually kind of like this, that, or the other. So the fact that they didn't like it, that's the thing I do like. So almost always in a negative review, there is going to be a clue that will tip off your reader that, that person just has a different take on the world than I do. So,
Right.
So I would you just leave it alone. I mean, if you absolutely have to respond in some way, don't do it yourself. Get a friend to do it, okay?
So it's not under your name or your account?
Not under your name, ever. Never.
That's hilarious.
You have to. Like, you cannot resist. You know? Call up your Uncle Vito and say, hey, we need some legs broken here, Vito.
Get something in there. It's funny that you should mention that in a negative review, there might be something that your reader or whoever, someone who wants your book and likes your book, and that's your audience, that they're going to discover that. Because I remember talking to you about a couple of horrible reviews I got for Marry Your Billionaire, and how people were like, I hate that it's a Cinderella remake. I hate that there's no sex in it. Like, where's the graphic sex scenes? And I was sitting there going, what part of sweet and clean romance do they not understand? And I was like, hello, the whole another Cinderella retelling, it's there. Like, I gave them all the clues. They should have seen that coming. Like,
in the subtitle.
I was like, why did they even buy it if they knew it was going to be that way? Like, they knew what they were getting into. And I remember you were like, no, that's really good, because anyone who is the audience for this and who loves this, they're going to see those bad reviews and they're going to be like, oh, well, that's not something that's going to deter me from reading this book. I'm actually really glad that I know that. So you're right. Absolutely.
So I think one other thing to keep in mind is that we always have disappointments in life, and it's not always about our writing. It's not always about a negative review. It's not always about low sales when we were expecting a bestseller's little orange tag, which I have yet to achieve, maybe never will, and oh well, whatever. But when we have those disappointments, and I don't know, last year I had a rough year and I had some disappointments, and there was a quote from The Incredible, oddly, that got me through. When I finally hit on it, it really changed things, and then I realized I could apply it to my writing as well. And like when things were not going right, as they often are not, because I'm so busy making mistakes and learning.
Right.
But this quote is from The Incredibles, and it's Brad Bird, and he has a lot of like wisdom for creative people. And if you'll recall, there's that little short lady who makes all their costumes, Edna Mode.
Yes.
Edna Mode. He asks her something about, well, what about my old costume with the cape? And she says, I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now. And that's a very freeing way to look at life. You can say, okay, well, yeah, I did get the 1-star review on Christmas Eve, and that was terrible. And I could look back and dwell on that forever. Or I could say, look, I am going to rewrite the first chapter and make sure it's coming off as an adventure from day one. I can fix the cover. I can change the keywords and the categorization, and that's still a good book. I know it's a good book. It was so fun to write. Of course it was a good book. And then just look forward. And one other thought along those lines is from a guy that's in he's in that indie writers group, and his name's Craig Martell, and he says, always remember that your windshield is much bigger than your rearview mirror.
Okay.
And so always keep looking forward and don't spend a lot of time looking back. Just keep building your skills, keep a good attitude, learn more, go ahead, make the mistakes, but learn the lesson from the mistake and don't give up. And that's probably my best advice for how to handle negative criticism.
Okay, awesome. Now, I had a question just because you and I have been in the same writing critique groups, okay? And for me, when I was first going into this, man, it was really scary to, read my stuff to, a group of people and to know that they were going to give me advice, because I was afraid, oh my gosh, what if they don't like it? What if the advice they give me just hurts my feelings and I burst into tears? Or, how do you handle getting constructive criticism in a setting like that? And, how do you decide what applies and what doesn't?
Well, and that is a really good question, because not all criticism is created equal. Just like with negative reviews, positive critique can sometimes be from somebody who doesn't get your stuff. They don't dislike your stuff, but they don't get where you're going. And so when you're in a critique group, you can kind of over time figure out which people tend to give you the stuff that you know will improve your work, and then you can, some of it you can say, well, some readers will take it that way.
And some readers won't, right?
Cut your losses and move on from that particular criticism. But, you know, sometimes I've gotten criticism from a very wise critique partner who said, well, you need to, like, shop all of this because this character is wrong. And I've thought, no, I don't. They just don't get my stuff. And then before you know, it kind of takes a while sometimes for truth to sink in. So it kind of need to take the wait a while technique if it's something that stings a little bit. And so if you wait just a little while and say, okay, well, how true was that? And think about it, and then you can say, yeah, and then maybe give yourself some time and then go back and read it and kind of take off your author's hat and just put on your reader-only hat. Forget that you wrote it, if possible. And that's easy if you kind of forget everything over time. That's another 5, I forget everything. I forgot what I wrote. But anyway, go back and try to read it with fresh eyes and say, okay, I do agree, or I still don't agree. And you, ultimately, if you're self-publishing, you live or die by your own efforts.
Right.
And so if you're willing to die by your own efforts and fall on your sword over this thing, then that's up to you. Nobody can tell you to take it out. And I've made the mistake of taking constructive criticism, well-meant criticism from somebody who, you know, in retrospect, kind of made me mess up my book. And then I've had to, like, go back to a previous draft and say, well, that was good advice, but it just didn't quite work for it. It ruined everything.
Right.
And so, you know, sometimes you can start running with it, but always save your old draft and see if it's still going to work for you and see if it feels right. Sometimes you have to start going down that path, and then you can say, okay, well, I can go down this path and see how well it's working, or else you can say, no, I'm not going to go down that path because I can see that is just going to trash it all.
Right.
So it takes a measure of humility, and sometimes that humility won't come for a couple of days, so don't be too hard on yourself. But let the critique sink in for a little bit before you jump in and make the changes, or before you don't reject all well-meaning criticism immediately just because you're like, that was mine and I am not changing it.
Right.
Because then we don't improve. And I mean, we always want to be on an improvement upswing.
Right.
We don't want to ever, get worse at writing. That would be dumb.
That would be devastating, really, for how hard we work, right? Jennifer, speaking of writing and all of the things that you've been doing, because I am, the blessed recipient of being your beta reader, and I get to read all of your stuff and see what's coming up next. I want to talk about this fun little Halloween novella that you have written. Would you please tell us all about it and the fact that it's free and that people can get it for free?
Oh, sure. Well, this Halloween novella is actually more of a short story. It's only about 20 pages, and it will give you, anybody who hasn't read my stuff, a chance to sample my work. Mostly, I usually write stuff that's basically just funny with romance. And this has a creep out factor, which is not usually my thing, but it was still really fun to write. And it's called, what is it called? I forgot. Can we edit this?
We'll edit this.
I really don't know what it's called. So starts with an A.
I know. I was thinking mergers and acquisitions, and I was
know.
like, no, you just did that one.
I know, yeah. Assumption of the risk.
That's right. That's what it is.
Assumption of the risk. And I have this series called the Legally in Love Collection, and all of them have these legal titles. And originally the book was called Knock, Knock, Scream, which is completely dorky. But anyway, I figured it would fit into the...
I really like that, actually.
Yes, knock, knock, scream. But it wasn't legal enough.
Right.
So,
right.
Anyway, it's called Assumption of the Risk, and it's about this school teacher who has bought a farmhouse at the end of a creepy, long, abandoned road in the 1950s, and it's a windy night, and she's received a threat from an angry student at school, and there are terrible noises in the yard, and there's a twist at the end. So
awesome.
Anyway,
I'm excited about that. I am going to
it's
put...
for free, and I'll put it...
Oh, yeah.
I'll put it on my website. It's not up there, but I'll put it up as the top thing on my blog.
Perfect.
Which is authorjennifergriffith.com.
Perfect. I will put a link in the description box for everyone watching this to Jennifer's blog, and also to this book where you can grab it for free, and then you can sample Jennifer's writing and see how fabulous she is, and then hopefully it'll get you locked into her Legally in Love series, because those books are so much fun to read. I always recommend them. I always recommend her Big in Japan book as well, because that's the sumo wrestler romance. It's hilarious. You guys need to try that out too. So all things Jennifer Griffith, you should just be trying. But Jennifer, I really want to thank you for being here with me, for talking about the woes of writing and getting critiqued by others, and how to handle some of that negativity in a positive way. I appreciate all of your wise, sage advice. Thank you so much.
Thanks. See ya.
We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.